Welcome back to the Cardiovascular Docu-Class. I'm your host, Jonathan Landsman. Today is all about clogged arteries and what you can do to avoid getting hurt. First up, I'd like you to meet Dr. Robert DeMaria as we talk about how diet affects your heart function. In this presentation, you'll find out which underappreciated vitamin is crucial for better heart performance and why a deficiency is directly connected to chronic fatigue. Are you concerned about irregular heartbeats? Then listen carefully as Dr. DeMaria explains how a simple, underused sound test reveals vital information for every person concerned about their heart. And finally, no one wants sticky blood, right? Well, Dr. DeMaria offers a great explanation as to how proper nutrition can improve your blood circulation. Enjoy this presentation with Dr. Robert DeMaria. So, Dr. Bob, I am pumped, no pun intended, about this for the heart. So many people don't hear anything about how nutrients, food, and how this whole thing really does impact our entire physiology, especially the heart. So please talk to us about it.
Well, that's pretty really amazing how people really don't have a understanding, Jonathan, how food impacts the whole body. So many years ago, I started using a tool which was and is an electronic stethoscope, and it's called a heart sound recorder. I believe that most of you know that your heart makes noises, lub-dub, lub-dub, but you might not realize the fact that those noises are caused by valves closing. But if you go backwards a little bit, there's a reason why valves close, and the integrity, Jonathan, on how they close is so important. They are directly impacted by what you're putting in and on your body. To give you an example, so the very first heart sound usually should be quite tight. Think of it as a real sharp angle. What we have learned over time, if you do not have enough B as in Bravo vitamins, that first heart sound is a little longer, and that makes your heart not as efficient as it should be. So we know that people who have a B vitamin need or deficiency might be a little tired and sluggish because their heart's not doing it it's slowing it down. The space is a little bit longer than what it should be. So sugar, by far, is one of those kind of anti-nutrients that literally takes the important B vitamins out of your body. So B vitamins are very significant. Now, there's something else that I learned along the way, is the liver is located right here. We've talked in the past at other segments that the blood flows up through the liver on the way to the heart. This was a big piece of news for me. When we started using the heart sound recorder, so we put the electronic stethoscope on the 4 different areas where the valves send the blood to, we started noticing a little hump after that first closure. You say, what was the hump caused by, Dr. Bob? The blood flow was being impeded through the liver. I'm going to say that again. If this liver is compromised for whatever reason, that liver could go all the way down to your pelvis. So if you have your hand in a cookie jar, if you're consuming alcohol, medication, over-the-counter medication, anything toxic, even putting chemicals on your body, including toxic sunscreen, your body has to process that over time. It might not be a month, it might not be a week, it might not be a year, but over years I have seen livers grow, and I actually see enlarged livers in teenagers, because their hormones are very active, and most of them probably, Jonathan, are not eating the very best food that they could be consuming. So that liver has so much to do with heart health. Now there's another gland in your body called the adrenal gland. There's two of them. The adrenal glands are located on top of your kidneys. So we do the heart valve number 1. It's supposed to be so wide, and we narrow it down a little bit. We don't want that liver hump. But if that adrenal gland is overactive, it could literally cause that blood to go rushing back into your heart from your lungs, causing a very large second sound. So we know the heart is a very sensitive muscle. When I first bought this unit years ago, we had someone that was in our office that was relatively a healthy individual. But when I looked at their heart graph, so the sound recorder takes noise, and it's so sophisticated. You ever see on the sidelines when they're doing TV for football games and other sports events, there's people holding this big round device. That round device is picking up sound. It's picking up sound from a long distance. Well, this electronic stethoscope can take that sound and turn it into a graph. It's just kind of like watching a scientific movie. Well, so what we just know that what happens is it can alter the physiology. Well, this young man had French fries for a lunch. I didn't know he had French fries until I looked at his graph, and his graph was like all over the place. And I said to his name, I said, "What did you do for lunch?" I just threw it out. I said, "Did you have French fries?" And he dropped his head, and he said, "Yes." Now, he said, "Well, Dr. Bob, what are you saying to me?" What I'm saying to you, this might be news for some of you. What you eat impacts you. How quickly? Do some search. Do a search on nitroglycerin. Go to your favorite search engine. Type in nitroglycerin. How long does it take to impact heart function? Ready? 15 seconds or less. You put a little tablet or pill of nitroglycerin in your mouth. You suck it for 15 seconds. Immediately, it impacts your heart. You can say, "What are you saying to me, Dr. Bob?" What I'm saying to you is anytime you put anything in your mouth, your body is being impacted, especially your heart. Now, in other segments, and I'd encourage you to watch all these different segments, if you don't have enough nutrients in your heart, and you can start feeling heart palpitations, I mentioned that to you, you really needed to have magnesium. I also have mentioned to you in a prior segment, so you're going to want to go back and watch this. There's a lot of good stuff. The blood flows back into this right here. It's called the right atrium. You're going to learn a lot more about heart physiology. The right atrium. If that right atrium, if that muscle is not relaxed, that blood comes back into the heart. On the heart graph, I can see some zigs and zags because the blood can't get back into the heart quick enough. So we might supplement with something that you might not hear too often called phosphatidylcholine. That would be like a great Scrabble word, wouldn't it? Phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine is like a scrubbing bubble inside of your body. Choline helps emulsify fat. Most of you watching me right now and listening to Jonathan and myself don't have a nice flow of blood and heart movement in your body. So when we have these heart sound recorders, sometimes you might actually have a miss of your second heartbeat, second heart sound. Oftentimes individuals need calcium or minerals. But Jonathan, what I've really learned from the heart sound recorder is digestive drugs. I like to call them acid soppers. An acid sopper means it sucks up all of the minerals. And what we see on a heart graph, so a heart graph should be nice and smooth. But on a heart graph with a person that has an acid sopper, there's a lot of zigs and zags. So what does that mean, Dr. Bob? That means their heart is literally quivering. This is the person that's walking up the steps and they can't catch their breath. This is the person that walks to their car and they can't catch their breath because their heart is not functioning at a nice rapid rate like that. What's an acid stopper, Dr. Bob? Prilosec, Zantac. What does it do? It stops your body from absorbing minerals. You know, it's kind of interesting as a side note, vitamin B12 is very important for red blood cell integrity. If you are taking an acid stopper drug, you more than likely could have a deficiency in vitamin B12 with the potential to have Alzheimer's and dementia, and you don't want that. So that is all a part of this whole mechanism that we have learned when it comes to heart, health, and diet. Now, when we talked about, this is significant when it comes to heart and iron, and I have talked about this before with aspirin and how it depletes your body of red blood cells. Some of you right now might not have enough good circulating blood. I just mentioned vitamin B12. Now, there's a blood test called a CBC with a differential. CBC, Charlie, Bravo, Charlie. I know a lot of you have had that blood test done. I want you to pull it out. I want you to look at it. You're going to come back, you're going to write and listen to this again. I want you to write down MCH. MCH, mean corpuscular hemoglobin. MCHC. If those numbers are elevated on you, that means you probably need B12. You have large blood cells that are not carrying oxygen. And guess what your heart needs to do? Push oxygen through the body. Some of you, especially ladies, if you have a heavy menses, might not have enough red blood cells. Now, this is significant. You're having a heavy menses because your liver is compromised. Your liver is compromised because you maybe have had more than one children, maybe you've not have enough B vitamins, but your liver is not clearing estrogen. If it's not clearing the estrogen, you're going to have heavy menses. If you have heavy menses, you're not going to have enough blood cells. Your heart has to push the blood cells through the body. Can you see how this is all tied together? So your liver also can impact your heart. But I'm going to share another nugget with you. I happen to be privileged to have access to a microscope. I've used a microscope since the mid-1990s. This is what I've learned. There's something called, and you can do a search on this, called rouleau formation. Rouleau formation is when red blood cells stick together. When red blood cells stick together, it'd be like having a stack of checkers. The surface area decreases in size. And with a decreased surface area, you can't carry as much oxygen. What causes the blood cells to stick together? Not enough water, not enough minerals, and an acid pH inside of your body. That means your body is too acid. When you're acid, your body needs to have minerals. So when you kind of listen to what I'm saying, minerals are very important for overall heart sound and heart function. Pretty amazing stuff, isn't it, Jonathan?
It is. You're talking about sticky blood.
Sticky blood.
And this is what people are experiencing more and more with the toxicity, low nutrient levels. Their body is becoming sticky, sluggish, calcified. All of these things is making it harder and harder for the blood to get around and deliver the oxygen where it needs to go. This is why people are suffering so much from health problems.
Well, you know, when we take films of people's spines, and we'll do something called a lateral lumbar. That's a side view of the low back. There's a large abdomen in the front of the body, in front of the spine, called the aorta. If somebody comes in and we see a calcified aorta, very first question, do you eat ice cream? And they look at me like, of course I eat ice cream. How'd you know? Well, this blood vessel in your body is being calcified because you're eating ice cream. Now, is it the fat? I have a feeling it's a combination of a lot of things, but there's another term called glycation. Glycation is when protein and sugar combine and it causes inflammation in the body. See, those blood vessels become calcified because there is inflammation. And when there's inflammation, your body is trying to protect itself, just like cholesterol. You know, I've talked about cholesterol with Jonathan before. Cholesterol is not good or bad. Cholesterol is necessary. Cholesterol is the building block for all of the steroids in your body. But if your cholesterol is elevated, almost think of it as your body is trying to go around and paint the inside of all of your blood vessels so there's not inflammation that's impacted health. I want you to get this from this particular segment. What you're putting in your body impacts your body in less than 30 seconds. I want to say less than 15 seconds. Between 15 and 30 seconds, whatever you're putting in your body's either celebrating or your body's going like, why are they doing that for? Like, are they know that they're going to create distress? Your heart beats 72 times per minute. That's essential normal. I exercise every day. I work very diligently to keep my heart rate down. I like it to be below 60. Do you know why? That means my heart works less. You take off 10 beats per minute, you put a lot of minutes on there, your heart's not working as hard as it needs to. And I want to go one step further when it comes to this aspirin idea. Aspirin is tricking your body. Aspirin, if you have thick blood, you have to backtrack because you're consuming too many safflower oil, sunflower, and other oils that are very toxic to yourself. But if you have to take an aspirin today, or you're told you have to take an aspirin, I would encourage you to get the Omega test done. The Omega test is a very specific test that'll tell you exactly what oil you have in your body, so you're not throwing the dice of what kind of aspirin you should be taking. A full dose, half dose, a pink one, a white one, a generic one. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yep. And what other kind of supplements should people be doing perhaps that even if they eat an organic diet, and maybe you also should jump in, we talked a little bit off camera, if people are eating, they think they're okay, organic sugar, organic, too much sweets, but on top of that, making changes to their diet, what other kind of supplements do you think would be helpful?
Well, I really think when it comes to the type of food that you're going to be consuming, the whole idea of organic sugar, it is kind of silly if you think about it. There's all kinds of sugars out there. Sugar, however you want to call it, is still going to compromise the function of your body. But I mentioned phosphatidylcholine. That's probably not really a common product. Well, I know I've been practicing since 1978. I don't have too many people come into my office that are taking phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine is one of those little known secrets. It literally helps your liver function, your gallbladder function, your nervous system function. So I want you to think about this for a minute. There's something called the seasonal affect disorder. Some of you watching me right now, maybe you've been labeled with the seasonal affect disorder. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but what we have noticed is your brain does not have enough neurotransmitters in it, and the acetylcholine, the phosphatidylcholine, is a wonderful precursor for brain neurotransmitters. So Jonathan, one thing that all of you I know, because most of you probably have compromised liver gallbladders, you could have at least 1 or 2 phosphatidylcholine every day. What I also have noticed, most individuals have altered heart function when it comes to increase or decrease heart speeds. I really have noticed some really good results using B as in Bravo vitamins. Now, we look at a blood test, and when we look at a blood test, we look at your liver enzymes. You're going to write this down, ALT and AST. If your ALT and your AST are low, you probably need vitamin B6. If your CO2, carbon dioxide, is low, you probably need B1, thiamine. I already mentioned to you MCH, so this is some test questions right now, and MCHC, if they're elevated, you need B12. So you're going to go back and listen to this. If those nutrients are off, chances are you don't have enough B vitamins. If you cry easy, if mosquitoes like you, I'm going to say that again. If mosquitoes like you, if you're to go and walk in the woods with me, the mosquitoes don't like me. They really love me, but they don't land on me. Everybody loves Dr. Bob, just like everybody loves Jonathan. But you could have somebody with you and they're going whap, 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 and they're sprayed with all this stuff on them. Mosquitoes smell B vitamins. They don't like them. So that's why I make sure I take some B vitamins every day. I don't cry easy. I exercise every day, and I don't have sore muscles. So people who have sore muscles after exercise, because it's a buildup of pyruvic and lactic acid, need B vitamins. So consider adding some phosphatidylcholine, some B vitamins, and most of you probably could use some type of good multiple mineral that dissolves easily in your body. And the reason is when you have stress, if you have stress out there, it causes an acid pH in your body, and an acid pH, Jonathan, cannibalizes minerals. And then they have leg cramps at night, and they wonder what's going on inside of them.
Yeah, that was a great point at the end. It's a very simple thing to look at, that if somebody is eating a little too sweet, which a lot of people understand, don't eat a sugary diet, it's demineralizing you. So maybe talk a little bit more, though, about some of the foods that are rich in minerals that you like.
Well, I eat a combination of a variety of organic foods. I have an organic salad every day. I have some mixed nuts throughout the day that have sea salt or Celtic sea salt. We use Celtic sea salt liberally on our salads and our food. I'd encourage you to find a salt that you feel comfortable with, that works well with your body. Some people use a Himalayan salt. I would not use any kind of commercial salt that has any kind of dextrose or aluminum added to it. You want something that is kind of granular. You might have to have your own, but it cannot be refined. You don't want aluminum with it. I really encourage people to, and I'm going to repeat myself on this, to eat green food, because green food is magnesium. And I know that so many people watching us right now, Jonathan, are magnesium deficient. And I know that magnesium is really important for calcium absorption. So you'll never go wrong. And I think one of the most amazing things to me is that people seem to steer away from green food or vegetables. So if you eat a vegetable and you tell me that it makes you not feel good, it's really not the vegetable. Your body is probably very acid. So I'd encourage you to saute those vegetables a little bit, easier to digest. So I don't promote a totally raw diet. My salad, of course, is raw. I mix it all. I have some raw food. I have some steamed food. We have some sauteed food. We might bake some our vegetables periodically. And I only eat organic animal tissue. And you try to do some sea vegetables if you have access to them, if they're really good. And I eat every day. I make up a package that has a half a red apple in it, slices of cucumber, 6 small tomatoes, a radish, a medium carrot, some cauliflower, and that's what I munch on during the day. So I'm getting a constant source of fresh, organic vegetables. Helps my bowels move good, helps me manage my diet, so I'm not going to be eating little gummy bears and little cookies all day long.
Yeah, and also what you just mentioned at the end about cauliflower and things like garlic, the sulfur-rich foods. Here it is, we're talking about how we want to eat healthy foods, we want to get away from the toxins, and we can actually get a double whammy in a good way by eating healthy food that's rich in sulfur to help escort those toxins out of the body, right? You want to talk about that for a couple minutes?
Well, sulfur is really important in the detoxification in the body. Your liver uses sulfur to help your body just get rid of all of the different toxins through phase 1, phase 2 of detoxification. I also know that sulfur is an important building block for collagen tissue. Sulfur is really important to keep parasites at bay because parasites don't like to have sulfur as a part of them. It's one of those nutrients that people don't talk about much, but great sources of sulfur would include what Jonathan mentioned: broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts are really good. Any type of cruciferous vegetable, and then you can add eggs, onion, garlic. I have onions every day of my life. I even have the green onions on my salad. We saute with onions. So I'm going to go back and say to you, I really let food be my medicine. Just like I'll throw this little secret out to you. I'm giving these Dr. Bob secrets of my experience. Some of you out there might have little floaters in front of your eyes. They're called vitreous floaters. Your liver is the storehouse for vitamins A, D, E, and K. If your liver is compromised for whatever reason and you're noticing little floaters, and if it's due to a vitamin A deficiency, That medium carrot every day will do your body good and potentially could help get rid of those little floaters that you've been plagued with forever.
And Dr. Bob, I know you're good with this to kind of calm people down, but I can imagine when people listen to a lot of my summits in the past in this master class, they hear about something and they start flipping out. Don't be so hard on yourself, right? When you talk about like, what vegetables should I eat? How much should I eat? Maybe you just talk about how, you mentioned before quickly, how even if you don't particularly like something that you know is healthy for you, if you keep doing it, your taste buds change, your energy level changes. You're literally changing your entire body. So be patient. And I guess my main message would be just get in what you can, right? But what do you say to people?
Well, I would just try one particular item. And I want you to know that raw is not always the easiest to get into your body. So if you go, and you can do an experiment, you go to your favorite store, get some organic broccoli, and just take a snip off and bite it. And then get a steamer. You know, a steamer, like the stainless steel, looks like a little bunch of holes, and you drop it down, you put some water in a pan, and then you put the broccoli in and steam it, like cut the little flowerets up. That broccoli tastes totally different when it's lightly steamed. Even if you do it for 2 minutes, you'll notice something else about that broccoli. It turns from a dull green to a vibrant green. And I want you to start trying different types of foods. Why don't you go to your local organic and talk to who's ever in the produce section. Try some kohlrabi. Kohlrabi is actually in the cruciferous vegetable family. And we bake also our vegetables. We don't do exclusively baking, but we do that as one of the options. And we are always mixing. You know, people say, Dr. Bob, you should do a recipe book. Here's the Dr. Bob recipe book. Get a cast iron skillet. Put some olive oil in it. And then saute some onions. When the onions are caramelized, and not with brown sugar, by the way, they'll start to turn brown. What I learned from going to a cooking class, you cook the mushrooms in another pan because the mushrooms have a lot of water in them. And then one of the best, and excuse me for saying this, but the best poop maker in the whole world is kale. Now, there's a couple kinds of kale, but the kind of kale I like is the broadleaf kale. I personally like to take the stem out because I think it can be quite chewy. And I stack them on top of each other and I slice them, watch your fingers, and I get this big old pile of cut up kale. So you have your onions over here, you throw your mushrooms in them, and then you throw the kale in it and you're sauteing it. In the meantime, you may have some organic chicken or organic ground beef or something organic over here sauteing, and you have a pure, true paleo diet. You're getting a great protein. If you want some fish, you can do that. Anything that's going to give you a combination, it's going to fill you up. And I'll guarantee you one thing, you're helping your joints, you're helping your body get a good source of sulfur. Mushrooms are a great source of zinc. The kale's are a great source of magnesium. And you are going to have the best bowel movement in the morning. And you can think of me when that happens.
There you go. That's a wonderful thought, Dr. Bob. What about also, like just as it's steaming, a little pinch of sea salt over it, some lemon juice. Again, have fun with it. Try to get it in you in the easiest way possible, right?
And sesame seeds. I know that we just briefly touched about sesame seeds. If your platelets are elevated, if your platelets, are low, sesame seed oil, sesame seeds, tahini is a good way to bring your platelets up. Once again, let food be your medicine. If you want a skilled practitioner to look at your blood chemistries, a skilled practitioner, a true wellness practitioner should be able to look at your blood chemistries and forecast for you years in advance where you're going. The most important thing for you is to listen and do.
Yep, and the last few things, just for another 30 seconds or so that we have left. Sprouts, great live food. We could have sprouted nuts, so it's kind of pre-digested, might be a good idea. And also I'm thinking about all the people who deal with heart issues, that have emotional issues connected to heart trouble. What a great winner just to take whatever food you have, slow down and chew it up really well.
That's a really good point. You know, microgreens are also really good. You can sprinkle microgreens on top of your salads today. You just want real life food. And your heart can be impacted by emotions. The heart itself, you can have joy, you can have depression, you can have anxiety. So emotionally, if you're starting to notice that you're having some issues, you really want to back off and listen to what we've been talking about to feed your heart right so your heart can handle all of those emotions.
It's great. Bob, thank you very much for being with us. Up next, I'd like you to meet Dr. Peter Osborne. In this presentation, you'll see how commonly prescribed medications can increase the risk of heart failure. In addition, are you taking statin drugs to lower your cholesterol? Well, you may be shocked to discover what Dr. Osborne says about these medications. And finally, most doctors fail to inform their patients about the ticking time bomb found inside the body due to the regular use of prescription drugs. Listen carefully to Dr. Osborne's urgent warning and get ready to take some life-saving notes. Okay, so Dr. Osborne, there's a lot of people out there, they're taking a lot of medications for all kinds of reasons, and certainly they're concerned about their heart. So let's talk about these drug-induced nutritional deficiencies. One of the biggest ones out there, millions of people exposed to statin drugs. How does this play a role in literally having people starving for nutrition?
Yeah, I think it's super important to understand anytime you are embarking on a journey where your doctor's prescribing you medications, that you have a really long and meaningful conversation about something called drug-induced nutritional deficiencies. So no matter what the medicine is, but as it relates to statins, statins block the production of CoQ10. Now, we were talking about CoQ10 last time, and I said that CoQ10 deficiency causes congestive heart failure, and it causes high blood pressure, and it causes muscle damage and muscle loss. It can cause neuropathy. And so you have a class of medication that potentially could damage your muscles and nerves to the point that you're in pain to such a degree that you can't function. There are cases of statin-induced neuropathy and myopathy or muscle and nerve damage where people are in wheelchairs. Now, that's not happening to everybody, let's be clear, but there are levels or degrees of damage, right? And so for some people that are really hypersensitive, they may be in the wheelchair, but for people maybe less sensitive, maybe they just have chronic muscle aches and pains. The muscles are hurting more. They don't want to exercise as much. They're kind of exercise avoiding, right? And one of the primary treatments for heart disease is physical activity. So if you're taking a medication that deters your body's ability to actually function physically, you could actually increase the risk for the disease that you're trying to prevent. Now, that's just the myopathy and the neuropathy aspect of statins. Statins also cause CoQ10 deficiency. CoQ10 is necessary to regulate blood pressure. So again, your doctor says, hey, your cholesterol's high. When cholesterol's high, we're making the claim that it increases your risk for the development of a stroke or heart attack. And so in order to reduce your risk, okay, we're going to put you on this drug for the rest of your life. And this drug depletes CoQ10. And CoQ10 deficiency causes the very disease that we're trying to reduce the risk of. Now, to me, if I'm going to take a medicine, I want it to be kind of a win-win situation. I don't want it to be a win-lose, or I certainly don't want it to be a break-even situation, because there's always a cost with medicine. There's always a cost. It's a cost that typically doesn't get discussed very well. There's a number in pharmacy, or a value called NNT, and that stands for numbers needed to treat. And so what that NNT value means for a drug is that it basically, it's a measure of the efficacy or the effectiveness of how a drug works. So for statins, the NNT value is 100. Now here's what that means. That means for one person to receive benefit from taking a statin, 100 people have to be prescribed a statin. That means the actual true efficacy of statins is 1%. So that means 99 people have to be potentially hurt by the drug for one person to receive benefit. It's not a fair trade for me. And if doctors disclose this and pharmacists disclose this, then I think people would have a differing opinion, or they'd have a different maybe mindset about approaching whether or not they wanted to use that medicine. But from a drug deficiency or drug-induced nutritional deficiency perspective, if you're taking a statin, I highly encourage any of you to go back and talk to your doctor about CoQ10 deficiency, because statins are notorious for causing CoQ10 deficiency. As a matter of fact, one of the primary statin manufacturers has a patent because they knew this. The early trials where they were trying to determine whether these drugs were safe, they identified statins causing CoQ10 deficiency. So one of the manufacturers actually patented a statin with CoQ10 in it. But they're holding that patent because patents are only good for so long, and when their patent runs up, then they're going to release this drug with CoQ10. For now, they're not even really talking about it. So I would just have that conversation with your doctor about statins and CoQ10, because CoQ10 is the real deal. If you're deficient in it, you're talking congestive heart failure, you're talking high blood pressure, you're talking muscle pain and potentially nerve damage, and those are not things you want to play around with.
And I know it's just a side note, Dr. Osborne, but just before we move on to some of the diabetic medications out there and how that can cause nutritional deficiencies, lowering your cholesterol, what number are we supposed to go for? Most people, conventionally speaking, are hearing that you can never have too low cholesterol. And I mean, that concept alone is nuts.
I would agree with that. Well, to put it nicely, it's pseudoscience. It's false science. The history behind cholesterol. So when I first started practice 20 years ago, normal cholesterol was 280 or less. And then what has happened over the last 20 years is we've had several different panels of doctors convene. One of the earlier panels, was a panel of 13 doctors. And these 13 doctors got together to take the number down, to lower it. So the number went from 280 to 250, from 250 to 220, from 220 to 200. And each time these panels convene, the doctors who are on these panels are directly on the payroll, well, for two of the biggest pharmaceutical companies that have the most to make from more statin use, and that's Merck and Pfizer. These, like one of the 13 doctor panel, there were 9 of the doctors were on the payroll for Merck and Pfizer, and that is a direct conflict of interest, right? In essence, they stood to earn more money by making the decision for the whole country as to what we wanted to consider normal cholesterol. And so anytime you have the fox in the hen house, it's not a good thing. We want science. We want science to prevail, and science means that the issues are never settled, that we're always open to new science proving us wrong or disproving what we thought. And when you have the majority of doctors on a panel that are making this very big, very important decision for millions and millions of Americans, and they're being directly paid by the companies who stand the most to gain, that's a conflict of interest. That needs to be explored a little bit more deeply. And I think we need to reopen this whole cholesterol debate. And there have been some great cardiologists who have written books and who have been very outspoken about how as a society we've demonized cholesterol, that could debate it far better than I ever could. But I just think it's important that that if you're on a statin, that lowering your cholesterol might not be the best option to reduce your risk for heart disease, and that opening that can of worms is something you're going to probably want to do in research.
And so now we're talking about another whole group of millions of people out there who have blood sugar issues. And again, they're being spoken to just like with cholesterol or any other kind of health problem. You got to be on a drug. So you have all these diabetic medications that are sapping people of their nutritional value inside as well, right?
You do, and unfortunately, diabetes is a disease of lifestyle. If we're talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1, not autoimmune diabetes, but type 2, it's a disease of choice. And anytime a person makes enough bad choices over time to affect their blood sugar in such a way, we basically label them as diabetic. And doctors will dispense pills to control or help them to control their blood sugar, but won't dispense information at how they could make changes to control their blood sugar. And to me, that it's a far better option, because diabetes is a completely reversible disease. But one of the most common medications is metformin. Metformin is a medication that improves insulin sensitivity, but the problem with it is it causes folate, vitamin B12, and CoQ10 deficiencies. Now, I talked about homocysteine in the last segment, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it right now because, again, homocysteine is a chemical we all make, but we shouldn't make too much, because if we make too much, it increases our risk for heart disease. Well, metformin, which again is a drug that helps to improve blood sugar, and remember that one of the greatest risk factors for heart disease is an increase in blood sugar. So again, going back to kind of the fundamentals here, you're trying to reduce your blood sugar, but in doing so, you're reducing two B vitamins that when low will increase a different chemical that increases your risk for heart disease. Okay, so vitamin B12 and folate work together to help lower or to keep homocysteine under regulatory control. And so if you're on this diabetic medication, for a year, 5 years, 10 years, the effect is, it's accumulative over time. It depletes your body of these nutrients. And again, when you deplete those nutrients, you're increasing your risk for developing problems. But go one step further. It's B12 and folate regulate homocysteine. They also regulate how your red blood cells are produced and matured. Now here's why that's important. When red blood cells are born, they're born from stem cells in your bone marrow. And so when they're born, they're very large. Red blood cells very big, and as they mature, they get smaller. And as they mature again, they get smaller, and eventually they lose their nucleus, the inside nucleus, and they take on a protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein inside of a red blood cell that carries oxygen. So coming back to B12 and folate, those two B vitamins help those red blood cells go from very large to mature so that they're capable of carrying oxygen. And so when you can't do that, when your B vitamins are too low, there's a name for that. It's called macrocytic anemia. A lot of doctors don't measure for this. They won't check for it. But macrocytic anemia, what it basically means is your red blood cells are big and they're clumsy and they don't carry oxygen very well. And so remember, one of the things that regulates blood pressure is the oxygen sensor in your carotid and vertebral arteries. And so that tells your brain sends that message for how much oxygen it's getting. And if it can't get enough oxygen because the red blood cells are clumsy and can't carry it very well, and they're clumsy because you're taking a drug to lower your blood sugar that causes the depletion of those B vitamins, now we're stuck, right? Now we're like, okay, our blood sugar is really well controlled, but we're not getting oxygen to our brain and our blood pressure is going up. So then the next step is the doctor wants to prescribe you blood pressure medicine. But then the blood pressure medication can cause B vitamin deficiency as well. It can also cause electrolyte deficiency. It can cause, some of them cause potassium loss and magnesium loss and calcium loss, B vitamin loss. And these nutrient deficiencies elevate your blood pressure. So you get stuck in what I call the prescription trap, right? Where you take one drug to correct a symptom of a problem, and then that creates a new problem, and it's nutritional, and that nutritional problem creates the very same disease or a semblance of the same disease that your doctor's trying to treat you for. And so you don't win. What you really end up with is a huge prescription bill, right? A ton of drug-induced nutritional deficiency side effects. You feel worse because your liver's having to pump these drugs through you, and so your liver's struggling to do its job. And so now you just feel bad all the time. You've got to limit your budget. You can't spend money on the things that you'd like to spend money on because your pharmaceutical bill is hundreds of dollars a month. And even with socialized medicine, that still doesn't come free, because if you're and you're in a socialized medicine situation, then your tax dollars are paying for it. My taxpayer dollars are paying for it. When in effect, all you really have to do is change your diet and change your lifestyle, and the vast majority of these medications wouldn't be necessary. But particularly metformin, as a drug, again, B12, folate, and CoQ10 deficiency. I mentioned statins a minute ago, causing CoQ10 deficiency. Most people that are taking statins are also taking metformin, and vice versa. So in essence, when your doctor's treating you for heart disease, it's generally because your blood sugars are out of control and your blood pressure's out of control. We call that metabolic syndrome, where you have too much weight and your blood pressure's high and your cholesterol's high. That combination, it's a very, very common combination that a doctor's going to have you on a statin, they're going to have you on metformin, blood sugar lowering drug, and then they're also going to have you on a drug that lowers your blood pressure. And so that's that trifecta. And then with the nutritional deficiencies caused by that trifecta of medicines, you're never going to win that war. You're always going to be struggling.
Yeah, that is a vicious cycle that you are describing. And also, I've heard so much about how many people are on insulin because of their blood sugar issues, and they're gaining weight year after year. So a lot of people watching us, they get it already. This is not working for them. They've got to get off this medication freight train, and they've got to change the way they're eating, without a doubt.
Yeah, heart disease itself, again, it's a disease of lifestyle. Diabetes is a disease of lifestyle. It's a disease, I call it a disease of choice. because you have a choice. You have a choice where you can eat what you want, not exercise, and pay the consequences and use the medicines. And look, if that's your choice, I believe in the freedom of choice. I believe that you should have the right to choose that. But at the same time, I believe that most people, most of you watching this show, would probably choose differently if you knew the side effects, if you knew the actual risks. And in medicine, there's something called informed consent, meaning when a doctor makes a prescription or makes a recommendation, that he's supposed to talk with you about the risks and the benefits, right? And give you informed consent. And that way, when you consent to taking something, you're saying, I understand the risk and I'm okay with it. But if you don't have all the information, I mean, how many of you watching today knew that metformin causes CoQ10, vitamin B12, and folate deficiency? How many of you watching today know that your diuretic is depleting you of potassium, magnesium, calcium, and vitamin B1 and CoQ10? Right? I mean, no doctors talk about that. And the reason why I know that is because I spent the first half of my career lecturing nationally and internationally to doctors, particularly to medical doctors, on the drug-induced nutritional deficiencies topic. I wrote one of my thesis papers on how antihypertensives or medicines for blood pressure affect vitamins and minerals and cause heart disease. And so it's an area of expertise that I've always been passionate about in research, but I've taught other doctors, and I know they don't learn it in medical school. And the reason I know that is because so many medical doctors come up to me after the lecture and say, and their minds are blown. They had no idea. Even a lot of pharmacists don't know. And look, the presentations I put together for these, they're very in-depth. I mean, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of medical references to back up what I'm saying. This isn't just hearsay. This isn't just Men's Health, right? Read the article and exercise a little bit differently. This is serious business, because if you're on 3 or 4 or 5 medications to control your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and to control your cholesterol, you're actually you're in a ticking time bomb where you're gonna still have a heart attack. You're gonna still develop diabetes. Like, we know that. Why? Because we've been using these medicines now for, statins have been in use now since the 80s. So we have almost 40 years of accumulative empirical evidence that says that taking statins has not reduced the incidence or the rate of heart disease or stroke. So why do we keep doing the same thing? Like, to me, the definition of insanity is repetitive behavior with an expectation of a different outcome. And here we are prescribing these medicines repetitively, and heart disease keeps going up, and diabetes is going up, and obesity is going up. It's the wrong solution. The solution is looking in the mirror. It's taking self-responsibility for your diet, for your actions, for your lifestyle, and owning those things. If you give in to passivity, meaning if you allow your doctor to give you a passive medication so that you don't have to take action, then you're part of the problem, not the solution.
I want you to go into a little bit more the blood pressure medications and how that's really keeping us from being well nourished. But, you were talking about statins before. To be very clear, people with low cholesterol, I mean really low, like to the acceptable level that conventional medicine says, you're in a good place. They're not at less of a risk of having a heart attack than those that have higher cholesterol levels, right?
No,
And the science is there.
Yeah, there was a study done, I want to say it was last year, 60,000 people. It was a really huge study showing that that statin use, especially if you were a female, really had no impact on your risk. There have been other studies that show that people that have longevity, the greatest longevity, are the people with the highest cholesterol. So, I mean, how do you account for that? Again, the way you account for that is you say, look, the whole theory of cholesterol causing heart disease is way oversimplified, it's way overstated, it's way overpublicated, and it's way overpushed. And it's time to question and challenge that theory, because it was never proven to be fact in the first place.
Something else I thought of before we get into blood pressure medication a little bit more is the idea that everybody's being treated for heart disease so much, right, with all these medications. You talked about oxygen levels being low in people that are so heavily medicated, how it's affecting the brain. I know it's an off topic, but I'm sure you have a bit to say about that. Is treating heart disease this way with these drugs, in my mind, no pun intended, seems to be increasing the risk of dementia that we hear so much about these days.
It is, and so look at statins. Statins deplete CoQ10. CoQ10 is very critical for brain cells to generate energy. right? So, one of the side effects of statin induced CoQ10 deficiency is brain fog, right? Memory loss. But we also know that statins lower cholesterol, that's their primary function, and that cholesterol is necessary for brain cells to form connections, okay? So if we go back 40 years, we were all told that brain cells, when they die, they're never going to be replaced. We were all told that they were permanent, right? And that brain, any kind of neurological issue was going to be permanent. And we've come to find out that's actually not true, right? There's something called neuronal plasticity, which is nerves have the ability to grow, heal, and repair. But they can't do that if they don't have enough cholesterol. I mean, cholesterol is a life-saving ingredient. So if you're super aggressive with statins, and a lot of cardiologists are, they're pushing people to a greater risk for neurological deficit, for a cognitive decline at an earlier age. And we see epidemic Alzheimer's. Look, we didn't see that. Before the 80s, we weren't talking about epidemic Alzheimer's disease. And what's changed since the 80s? There are a few things that have changed since the 80s with the induction of statins on mass scale. One is low testosterone in men. Everywhere you drive now, you see a low T center on a corner, right? Everywhere you turn, you see doctors prescribing testosterone to men. And again, correlation is not causation. However, it's interesting to note that because we need cholesterol as it's the mother hormone, right? So think of it as the baseline ingredient. You can't build a car without metal, without steel, or I guess you could, but it wouldn't be very effective. Just like you can't build testosterone without cholesterol. And so we see men with testosterone problems. But what else do we see? We see, in addition to that, we see an increase in Alzheimer's, right? We see an increase in behavioral disorders, right? CoQ10 deficits. So there we see an increase in things like ADD and ADHD, adults being diagnosed with subjective psychological, they don't have enough attention. And the reason they don't have enough attention is not because they can't, it's because their brains won't function because they don't have the nutrients that are necessary for the brain to work properly because they've been medicating themselves, and that medicine is actually disrupting their biochemistry to such a great degree they can't function anymore. So again, cost. What is the cost of those medications? It's what you should be asking yourself, before diving in.
And all of this stuff, I'm also just thinking of the person on a human level, so medicated like this, so low in energy. And now Western docs are saying, hey, you should just eat better. And then they take this attitude too. I know that they're taught this even through medical school. People aren't really interested. They'll never make changes. How are they supposed to if their brain function is down, their energy level is low? How are they supposed to have that will and that desire and that basically that energy to make these changes that they really need to make?
Well, I would even go backwards one step further and say, what pomposity to try to predict what your patient will or won't do with the information. How dare you not give me the information because you assume that I'm not capable of making the change, right? I mean, the doctor's job is not to judge. The doctor's job is to educate. Doctor means teacher, right? And teacher is an educator. And to be an educator, two things have to happen. One, you have to give full disclosure, right, to the best of your ability and knowledge. Nobody knows everything. We all know that. But to give the best disclosure, the fullest disclosure that you can, with the best of your knowledge, not making assumptions about whether a person will or won't do something, right? That's the biggest mistake. Because what that leads to is it leads to a vastly undereducated army of individuals who are looking for help but not receiving it, all because we don't think you have what it takes to change your diet. That's ridiculous, right? I believe that if a person is educated well enough, they're going to make the right decision. Even if they don't make it perfectly 100% of the time, let's say they make it right 50% of the time. Is that going to improve their health? Is that going to improve their outcome? Is that going to potentially lower their blood pressure and control their weight better? So at the end of the day, I really think it's important for doctors to reevaluate the way they communicate. And that way they can give not only informed consent about the risk of medications, drug-induced nutritional deficiencies, but give real meaningful advice. Take the time to actually talk about diet and lifestyle. Brushing over the phrase, just eat better, doesn't mean anything, because eat better, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? Eat better has to be more specific for the individual, right? Because for some people, eating better is, I'm not going to drink soda anymore. Instead of drinking soda, I'm going to drink orange juice, right? And so that's not really better if you're diabetic. So the specificity of what eat better means has to be done on a much more personal one-on-one level if we expect to see any kind of great outcomes. The age of generalized medicine is in its death throes, and the age of personalized medicine needs to come to the forefront.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Osborne. I feel at this point in time, still, with all the events I've done, all the information that's out there, all the work that you've done, way too many people are completely uninformed about this. So at the very least, we have to tell them. That's why I appreciate you talking about this. Blood pressure. This is a big deal. People are mostly told, conventionally speaking, your blood pressure is high. The only answer that's presented to them, it's crazy to me, drop your blood pressure down. No discussion as to why the blood pressure is going up and addressing that problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's another fundamental problem, in my opinion. You know, blood pressure goes up for a reason. We talked earlier about oxygen and oxygen receptors and vessels, blood vessels that help the brain, you know, get adequate oxygen. Well, what happens when the brain doesn't get adequate oxygen? Brain fog, fatigue, lethargy. We can't remember things, right? So the whole principle of lowering blood pressure artificially with chemicals without assessing why the blood pressure is high in the first place seems to me like a death trap for somebody's brain. And this, you know, look at the side effects of most blood pressure medications. Fatigue, brain fog, like top of the list, right? And so your brain can't function when it doesn't get oxygen. So you need pressure. So blood pressure is high for several reasons. You know, you've got lack of oxygen, you've got lack of physical activity, you've got things like smoking, risk factors like that, you've got eating incorrectly, overconsumption, gaining weight. For every, you know, pound of fat you have, you've got to grow at least a mile. Some say up to 3 miles of blood vessels to feed a pound of fat. So if you're 40 or 50 pounds overweight, and you got 150 miles of blood vessels, now that your heart has to pump blood to, right? That's going to increase pressure, don't you think? Just a little bit. So it's looking at those things, I think, being more importantly, because, you know, the other thing we really should talk a little bit about are the different blood pressure medications and how they create nutritional deficit. So like if you're on a diuretic, diuretics like Lasix, furosemide, HCT, hydroxychlorothiazide, or hydrochlorothiazide, sorry. These medications cause water loss, right, through your kidneys predominantly. They cause you to flush more water so that it lowers your pressure. So it dehydrates you basically, right? And so now you're chronically going to be dehydrated for the rest of your life for the sake of taking care of your blood pressure.
And just to be clear, dehydration alone is really bad for the heart, no?
Yeah, it's terrible for the heart. Dehydration is terrible for the skin. So if you're, vanity is what drives you, you want wrinkles, let's dehydrate you, right? You want less full lips and less plump skin, let's dehydrate you. And let's do so on purpose for the sake of lowering your blood pressure. But I've mentioned a number of times the deficiencies that come along with blood pressure medications, but particularly they deplete magnesium, calcium, potassium, okay? These three electrolytes regulate blood pressure. And as I mentioned, I alluded to this in an earlier conversation, the DASH studies, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension studies, show that calcium, potassium, and magnesium are the primary reasons why blood pressure goes up for the average American eating the average American diet. So that in and of itself should give us cause and caution or cause to not want to jump into taking a diuretic as a full-blown solution. Maybe temporarily so that you don't have a stroke next week, but like let's lower it, but let's then give you the information that you need to help, take action steps to lower it on your own. We've got lots of classes of drugs too. So for blood pressure, you've got ACE inhibitors, you've got ARBs, angiotensin receptor blockers as classes. You've got calcium channel blockers. The calcium channel blocking, does that sound like a good idea to you? Blocking how your calcium functions with your nerves? That's a disaster. I mean, muscle cramps, muscle spasms, heart spasms. Like these are all side effects of blocking calcium channels. You have to understand that calcium channels are in every neuron. So your brain cells function off of the electrolyte calcium flooding into the nerve tip. And if that is being blocked by a medication, you're not going to think very clearly. You're going to be foggy-headed. And again, when you're foggy-headed and you can't think clearly, you make bad decisions, right? Or maybe you're less prone to making good decisions. Or maybe you're just foggy and tired so you don't feel like exercising or doing much. So we want to be aware. Again, calcium channel blockers, ACE inhibitors, ARBs, these classes of medications they can cause zinc deficiency. Now, from a heart disease perspective, zinc is one of the most potent drivers of antioxidant function in the body. There's a special system in our body called superoxide dismutase, or SOD. And think of it as a motor that helps defend and protect your body from free radicals. Free radicals or oxidation, that's one of the biggest culprits in heart disease, right? So these drugs block zinc. And so zinc is like the car keys that start the motor of one of the most potent antioxidant systems that your body has to offer. But zinc deficiency also causes loss of taste and smell. So let's take this just a little bit further. If I can't taste and smell my food, and we know this because it's been very well researched, one of the first things adults will do is they'll go to the salt shaker, right? Or they'll gravitate toward the sugar bowl, okay? And they'll smother their salad up in a dressing that's loaded with sugar so they can taste it. They'll smother up their plate with salt. And we know that processed salt is a driver of increased blood pressure, and we know that sugar is going to drive up your weight, it's going to drive up your insulin, it's going to drive up your blood glucose, it's going to contribute to diabetes. So just the fact that these medicines can deplete your zinc and alter your taste and smell, they're going to alter your food choices, because now you're going to gravitate and you're going to make different choices because you can't taste or smell anything.
And then you just mentioned zinc at the end, which has been big in the news lately, especially with people concerned about bacterial or viral infections in particular. And now all I'm thinking about when you're talking about how it's conventionally treated, blood pressure and all these medications, and now you become zinc deficient, now you're at a much higher risk for infections.
Well, why do you think, the CDC's recently released some new data on COVID, right? And so originally, and my numbers aren't exact here, but I'm approximating, it was about 190,000 people were originally being told that they had died as a result of COVID. But upon further analysis and going back and looking at the data, it was more like 8,000 or 9,000 people that died from COVID, and the other 181,000 or so had comorbidities, meaning they were on these blood pressure medicines, these statins, they were on these diabetic medications. And one of the things we do know is that these medications and these diseases increase a type of receptor on the surface of our cells called the ACE receptor, specifically the ACE2 receptor. This receptor is a door for COVID. So it's how COVID gets into your cell. And so when you are taking all these medicines, you make more of these COVID doors. So you make your cells more available for COVID to have access, right? And so now you're more prone. You have a greater tendency. This is why we see all the deaths with comorbidities, right? It's not COVID that's killing them. It's their lifestyle and their drug choices that's leading to such a severe state of malnutrition, disrepair, that now they're susceptible to this virus getting access to their cell. And one of the reasons why zinc is so important is because zinc is one of the only known substances, period, that we know can prevent viral replication in 4 different ways. And this is why a lot of hospitals right now are adopting a policy. If you look at a lot of their policy on treatment of COVID, their policies are IV vitamin C, quercetin, which is a bioflavonoid, because quercetin opens the cells and allows zinc to come in. It's called a zinc ionophore. It's the same thing hydroxychloroquine does, right? And so it's just a natural one. So hospitals are adopting policies where they're giving vitamin C, quercetin, zinc, hydroxychloroquine, and an antibiotic, right? And that's kind of a cocktail formula that a lot of them are using. And the hospitals that are using that formula have virtually no mortality rates coming out of them. Like this is one of the most effective cocktails that we've seen clinically working, and that's why they're adopting the policy. So again, going back to the medicines, if you're taking these medicines, right, and you're depleting your zinc and your calcium and your potassium and your magnesium, and we haven't even begun to mention vitamin D. Some of these drugs cause vitamin D deficiency, and vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D is one of the most potent immune regulators you have. And so one of the oldest forms of therapies against infection is called STAS therapy. And that's high doses of vitamin D for 3 days. 150,000 international units of vitamin D for 3 days at the first sign of a cold or a flu can be very, very effective. And so again, if you're being told to stay inside, right? Don't get any sunshine, don't worry about nutrients, but take your medicine and hide. Like that's like the worst possible scenario that you could create that is going to allow more prolific deaths to occur, not just from poor health, but also from the social isolationism and all that. I know we weren't going in to talk about COVID today, but I think it's important and I think it's relevant considering the timing of what's happening in the world.
No, it is, Dr. Osborne. As we close out just for another few seconds or so, the idea in general about all of this creating more mental and emotional stress on people. Everything you've been talking about with me is about informing people more. Because I think in general, we're talking about COVID or anything, heart disease, cancer, anything that somebody is struggling with, anything that you might potentially be afraid of, let's just say it right out loud, that the more you know about something and how to take care of it well, the less afraid you'll be. All of this stuff that's going on today, I think that most people suffer with, is because they don't know what to do. And there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. All of that's bad for the heart. That's why it drives me to do these programs.
Yeah, and I love your platform, and I think this information is going to help so many people. I would say if you're stuck in fear mode, the best thing you can do is get educated. The best thing you can do is take action on that education. And remember something, I will point one last thing out. We live in a world today where we spend more money per person on healthcare than any other country in the world. And yet at the last grade report card for our healthcare system, we were, I think, 37th out of industrialized nations. So we spend more than anyone, but we're ranked almost last. What that means to me, and again, I'm not trying to be accusatory. If you're a doctor and listening to this, if you work in a hospital, if you're a nurse, if you're a healthcare provider, this is not me attacking you and what you've done or what you've been doing. This is just me simply calling out truth as I see it. We spend more money on procedures and healthcare and medicines than any country in the world, yet we're ranked almost lowest. There's a problem with that. And it's time to look at that. It's time to reevaluate that. And I think if we can all come together and agree that, look, there's definitely a problem with the way things are going because people are sicker than they've ever been. And COVID hitting, we realize that this virus is real, but it's probably nowhere near as dangerous as what we've been told. And the people that it is dangerous for are the people who are partaking of the medical care instead of the lifestyle changes, the diet, the lifestyle of exercise and sunshine and love and stress management and clean air and clean water. Like these are fundamentals to human health. And if we don't start addressing those first, then we're going to keep going on this trajectory. And this is not a good trajectory. We're going to see more pain and more suffering in the world than we've ever seen if we don't put a stop to it.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. Good information. I'm sure you would agree this kind of information will never be popular with the mainstream media outlets. So please help us to get this life-saving information in front of as many people as possible. Share this event with family and friends. And remember, each day of this event has 2 videos to choose from. So before today ends, be sure to check out the presentations about eliminating the threat of arterial plaque with Dr. David Minkoff and Dr. Cynthia Foster. Their wisdom will blow your mind.